Susan Shopek is a member of the Minneapolis Theosophical Society and currently serves on our board. She is an ordained interfaith minister and ceremony officiant. In addition to ceremonies, her ministry includes chaplaincy and spiritual care in long-term care facilities and hospice, as well as grief support for individuals and families. She is an enthusiastic numerology teacher and consultant, sharing the value of numerology as a tool for self-discovery and spiritual wisdom. From 2011 to 2019, she was an instructor of numerology in Normandale Community College continuing education program in Bloomington, Minnesota. In her spiritual guidance and support work, Susan draws on numerology, astrology, and intuitive skills and ageless wisdom teachings, energy healing methods, and an interspiritual approach to serve the needs and interests of her clients. So I'm going to hand it off to Susan and go figure out how I'm going to get the PowerPoint done.
Well, thank you, Hope. And you found it?
I found it. It just came back on.
Oh, wow. Isn't it technology? And let me mention, hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And I'm really looking forward to our time together. I just want to mention that in the I could run you a long list of technical difficulties over the last few weeks I've had, but I have to tell you that today, my printer has been on the fritz, but today nothing. It's dead, even though I've gotten to work off and on with different issues over recently. So guess who printed out my talk after I had it hot off the press this afternoon with edits? And Hope printed it out on her super fast printer, drove it over here to my apartment, and I ran downstairs and got it, and here we are. So thank you, Hope. And don't you love it? I'm sure you all appreciate technology story. This PowerPoint slide Hope had found before we started the Conscious Dying and Continuity of Consciousness study group. And I just thought it was so lovely. I thought it'd be great for our welcome. You may have seen it in our announcements. What's the idea of these birds or geese or, crossing from one shore to the other certainly speaks of our topic, as well as the reflection in the water. Everything, I think, speaks to our topic, and it's so lovely. So as Hope mentioned, I'm just recapping a little bit. The past 2 Thursdays, we have had presenters on various topics in our themes of continuity of consciousness and conscious dying, and that would be Von Braschler and then Berta Gilsdorf last week. And I'll finish it off tonight. And then I do want to, as Hope mentioned, Jean Kellett kicked everything off with a wonderful program on September 26th on these topics. So we're, each of us is choosing certain topics within this big theme. And tonight, my main themes will mainly emphasize the soul, as continuity of consciousness isn't even possible without touching in at the soul level. And I'll also have a theme of oneness and unity that it's universal and will weave throughout our evening as well. So first, I'd like to do a very brief recap of continuity of consciousness stages and tools. If you were here the last couple times or at Jean's, Jean did mention these, but I think at this point, a recap would be useful for us. And then we'll also look at what is meant by death is an activity of the soul. And then I'll share an overview of what happens at the time of death and transition from the ageless wisdom perspective. We're also exploring soul infusion and soul alignment tonight, including the Rainbow Bridge a bit, which is also called the Antakarana. And depending on our time, I have 1 or 2 practices we could do for soul alignment techniques. And ultimately, we'll also be talking about the inward path. I look at it as into the soul and the expression of the soul as symbolized by its outward and beautiful expression of beauty and wisdom and joy and love and all these things that are soul qualities. And I'm going to use the symbol of the rose to sort of have a visual and to kind of demonstrate that idea, or for me, it's a strong feeling to you. So, just a little side note that the sun is going to be moving into Scorpio on October 23rd. And that's a water sign of regeneration and healing and birth and death. So the topic at this time of year is also pertinent. And it's a time when many of us, the Scorpio time, where we may experience personal healing and regeneration, especially in the area of your life where Scorpio is located in your natal chart. So if you have your chart, you might want to check out where Scorpio, the sun is moving through Scorpio in the coming sun sign, 30 days or so. And so as we shift more into the program, let's take a couple centering breaths. And just as we come together this evening, we'll bring our attention to the topic at hand, and let's give our mental body the mental self the command to relax. And the emotional body, let us give that the command to relax. In the physical body, and take one more breath. And let's, on the screen, we have Oh Hidden Life, which is something we often love to have at our meetings. And I'd like to read it. Oh Hidden Life, vibrant in every atom. Oh hidden light, shining in every creature. Oh hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he is therefore one with every other. Thank you. So let us recap a little bit about continuity of consciousness, what supports the development of that, and as well as conscious dying. There are 3 stages that we're aware of, and one is lucid dreaming, and that was something that Jean Kellett and Von Brasler addressed in their presentations, a very important aspect of developing continuity of consciousness. And then the next stage would be, or of the 3 stages, is simultaneous consciousness on both the physical plane and the higher planes. And the third is the ability to remain conscious through death into life after death. And some of the tools or practices to support the development of those stages include meditation, which of course is a big one, and certainly prayer and reflection. There may be some other practices as well that you find important to you, but those would be key, the ones I mentioned. And the final step of continuity of consciousness is conscious dying. And some call it conscious living, which is making soul contact and continuing to strengthen it. In a nutshell, that's what it is, for a little recap. To start out our segment about the ageless wisdom perspective on death and some of the things that happen at the time of death, this quote by Khalil Gibran, I think, is just lovely. And I think I'll read it just because it'll have, be on the recording. If you would indeed behold the spirit of death, open your heart wide into the body of life. For life and death are one. even as the river and the sea are one. In the depth of your hopes and desires lies your silent knowledge of the beyond. And like seeds dreaming beneath the snow, your heart dreams of spring. And that's an excerpt from On Death, which I'm sure many of you have read. And Hope, when you mentioned Egypt in the beginning, the Egyptian, that was so wonderful. They didn't even have a word for death. That's pretty amazing. And that reminds me of Berta's presentation last week, too, as we navigated around the globe and currently and into ancient times of the different viewpoints, and especially ancient Egypt. And their, I guess, let's just say the word, all, the cycle is all one. And so death is an activity of the soul. And we can look at it as the soul, at a soul level, we're playing out the cycles, life and death. They're all one cycle. And of course, in our culture, we don't necessarily see it that way, but I think a lot of us who are here tonight have that sense and can at least have some resonance with that. And when I do memorial services and funerals and things like that, there's a part where I always say in my little talk about the certainly we're acknowledging the grief and the loss, but then there's a part where I say there's also a part of us that knows deep within us that there is more. And the wisdom of our spiritual teachings and the wisdom and love deep in our hearts tells us that the light that it's given life to our loved one cannot be extinguished. The soul that animates each of us is eternal and ongoing. That which looks like death to us from our physical life is really the soul's birth into spirit. And I think that's maybe well received by many at these services, and some may have a question mark. But I think, again, our group can see that the cycle of birth is really no different when the baby's born and when we exit for a time to our next level, that it's a birth into spirit. And I'm going to read you just a paragraph from one of the esoteric books. I didn't write it down at the moment, but it's probably Death, the Great Adventure, one of the Bailey esoteric teachings. Death of the physical and of the vital energy occur almost at the same time. For a short time, the etheric double remains near the body, then follows the physical and vital energy in dissipating. With physical, vital, and etheric death, one avenue of expression, one instrument of the personality, the physical is lost. After death, we're not away somewhere else, but are right here at a different rate of vibration, which is not perceptible to most. Again, the emphasis on shedding the physical and eventually the etheric, etc. And so I'd like to share with you in a very condensed way some of the things that happen at the time of death, again, from the ageless wisdom perspective. And starting from the soul itself, the soul sounds forth a word of withdrawal. And then, of course, certain physiological events take place. And, I forgot to see how to pronounce it. Nadis, N-A-D-I-S. A vibration runs along the nadis, which is the etheric counterpart of the nervous system. The bloodstream becomes affected with a substance produced by the glandular system, which in turn affects the heart. And a psychic tremor begins, loosening the connection between the nadis and the nervous system. There is usually a pause at this point in order to carry forward the loosening process as smoothly as possible. Then the etheric body is loosened and begins to gather itself together for final departure, followed by another pause. Then the etheric body emerges from the physical body at the chosen point of exit. And I know we've talked about those points of being either the solar plexus, the heart, or the top of the head, crown chakra. Then the etheric body is gradually dispersed. And this quote it is from Death, the Great Adventure. And then a word sounds forth. The descended, radiating point of light ascends, responsive to the dimly heard recalling note, attracted to its emanating source. This man calls death, and this the soul calls life. And just a couple points to mention. It's important to remember that the chakras are not within the physical body. And once the body, we've vacated the body, when death has assumed to be taken place, but a process is still occurring. And within the etheric body, and therefore the person may not technically be truly dead yet. Departure of the soul only means death to the central nervous system. And there's still much organic life in the body. And as Dion Fortune succinctly states, it does not die all in one piece. And that has served me well in terms of when I've been present at deaths, to not, for myself and for the people who may be present, to not just say, well, that's it, that there's a process going on, and to be respectful in the room, and to know that our person is in a process and gathering itself and things like that. And I'm sure you've had some experience as well, which would be great in discussion to talk about. We're not without help when we move to the other side, as the angels assist us with our transition. There's an angel at the head and one at the foot of the bed, or the feet. The departing soul follows the angel at the foot of the bed. And anyone standing there is nudged by the angel to step aside. The person then feels the urge to or need to move when that happens. It is said that the angel present at our birth, who helped usher us in to the world, is also the angel who helps at our death, ushering us into our new life. So that's very comforting and beautiful. I don't know if you've had that experience, but at a couple different deaths I've been at, one was a friend of my dad who they were taking care of him in hospice care at their home, and I was visiting him one evening when he was starting to be less responsive and everything. Well, I tell you, I was standing at the foot of the bed, and I wasn't expecting, he wasn't about to pass at that very moment, but I was standing there and I felt a definite nudge to move over. And so then I was reminded of that, what I just read to you about the angel at the foot of the bed. Now, of course, my physical body is technically not, we're in two different vibrations, but there's something about the angel saying, move over. Let's see it when we were at my grandmother's passing, and my mother was at the foot of the bed, and you know how sometimes the dying person chooses how they want to go and who's in the room and things like that. Some of us had left the room for a very brief time, but my mother, the daughter-in-law, was right there. And she told me, and she knew nothing of this, she told me when we were talking about it, that she was at the foot of the bed and she felt this real strong need to move. So to me, in my personal experience, that seems to be accurate based on those two experiences I just mentioned. And I want to hear if you've had those too. Oh, and one of the beautiful occurrences at the time of the death is that of angels gently rocking the person, which helps loosen him or her from the body. This can be seen by those with psychic sight. And the moment of death is sacred, and those present receive of this sacred energy. And it is a privilege to be present at a person's death. But I also think that if we're not, it's okay too. You know, there's a lot of orchestration that goes into the whys and wherefores of one's passing. So I wish we could talk, but I want to ask you a question. If you've ever seen a dying person having a very subtle but definite vibration happening, I always saw that, but I assumed it'd be something that everybody could see because it was so obvious. It's just this very fast vibrating of what seems like the physical body, but it's not literally shaking, but it's very subtle vibration, very fast. And so I don't know if that's perceiving that loosening from the body, or if it's what I mentioned before about, didn't I say something a minute or two ago about sort of a psychic disconnecting from the body? But in any event, that vibration, that shaking appearance seems to be something we can discern and see, at least in some cases. And then, you know, I'm kind of jumping around on this much bigger process about the death process and things around it. But at the time, right before a person dies, they often regain momentary consciousness. And again, I bet you it's something you've seen before. And sometimes it's to say goodbye or to smile. And of course, we know that sometimes the dying person will see into the other side and cross the veil and perhaps see angels or other loved ones who have crossed over. And when my mother died, my two sisters and I were right with her. And when we realized she was going to be passing within minutes or whatever, somebody ran into the living room. Oh, one of the people helped take care of her and said, "Susan, your mom's awake." And I flew into the bedroom, and there she was with her eyes wide open and looking around. But my two sisters were in there, and my first thought was, oh, this can't be good. You know, it wasn't like, oh, she's awake. It's like, uh-oh. For me, that was like, this is near. And so we were surrounding her and crying, but also loving her and sending her off. It was beautiful. She opened her eyes and looked around at each one of us specifically. We knew she knew we were there. She started to say something that we could not hear, but she moved her lips and tried to say something, and then she was gone. And it was a beautiful moment and heart-wrenching as well. But when I was telling my mom's doctor about that, he assumed it was what that sometimes when a person dies, their eyelids may open and kind of be stuck at that moment, you know, and that he thought that's what I was seeing and thinking that was so special. And I said, no, she's looking around at it. And after I told him, he said, oh, okay. He realized that wasn't the same thing. So, very brief mention of a friend of mine who worked in hospice many years ago now. She talked about the most conscious death she had ever seen was a woman who was passing she looked straight at Carolyn, my friend's name, Carolyn said for 3 to 5 minutes, just looking at her. And she said her eyes were open the entire time, and then she just, the light went out and she passed with that, in that awareness. And Carolyn described it as she was there and then she wasn't. And that reminds me of what you said last week, Vaughn, about your cat, that particular cat who died consciously with his eyes open and making a sound. And he's staring in your eyes, correct? I know you're on mute, but he's nodding away.
Yes, it's true. Not sleeping, but nodding, yes. It's very true. It's the cat was really connecting with me on a I would say on a spirit to spirit level or a soul to soul level. Mm-hmm. As people with pets don't always do. Mm-hmm. But at that moment, he was speaking to me on a soul level.
Mm-hmm. That's a great example. Yeah. And what an experience that was. I don't have my computer is not showing the time. What time is it? 7:37. Okay. Just want to discern where to go in our time together. Let me share one more thing about this part of it. After death, most people find themselves on the astral plane, and disciples and initiates who live mostly in their minds find themselves on the mental plane. I'm just reading to you specifically about From Death, the Great Adventure. If a person is undeveloped, they usually have little to do after the elimination process of the desire body. So remember, a plane is a state of consciousness, not a location. So I know much more could be said about what I just read, but I just wanted to include it as part of this, perhaps discussion later too. And then, let's see, I think it would be a good time to go into our next segment, which Hope already intuited. The soul. Now, what's up on the screen is a diagram of the 7 planes that Jean Kellett used in her presentation. And this is one she had used when she taught on this subject. And remember, she had a 4-year course on this subject. So there's a lot of ground to cover if we really want to dive into all of this. So these 7 planes, I'm just putting up on the screen as just a refresher, a reminder of everything from the physical up to the divine, as well as to mention that each plane has 7 levels with each of the 7 planes has 7 levels within each. And you see the triangle, which is marked the soul. I know it's not easy to see this slide, but you see the soul residing in the higher mental levels. And this is, I think, a really good example of, there's so many planes and levels, but these triangles really are a great visual, I think, and for simplifying the personality level. And then as we proceed upward, we reach the soul represented there in that middle triangle. And then, of course, the monad, or you may call it our divine spark of our being. Well, I see it says the divine self. I Excuse me. I just realized that I'm not wearing my computer glasses. Yes, I have separate glasses. So I won't be staring with my nose right into the screen at you. That's better. Okay, so this slide is called the periodical vehicles, the threefold extension of self. And I think it's important to just use this as we continue to move into our talk about the soul. I'm just going to give a sentence or so for each level. The top, the monad, is the highest aspect of oneself. It's the true identity and is frequently referred to as the divine self. The monad can be an expression of any of the 7 ray types. And that in itself would be an entire study. But suffice it to say that's the essence of that level. And then the soul level is the consciousness aspect of ourselves and is often referred to as the higher self. I know some traditions have some different words. Some might call the higher self the soul. Some might differentiate the higher self from the soul. But for the purposes of this, we're calling the higher self an aspect of the soul. It represents the bridge that links spirit with matter. And its role is to act as an outpost for the monad and can be considered an extension of it. The soul can be found on any of the 7 rays, though it's my understanding it has an affinity with the 2nd ray. The soul is best understood as that part of us that conveys spiritual love and wisdom unconditionally. And it's the cultivation of soul energy that is the primary goal of esoteric philosophy or teachings. And then the personality is that part of us, of course, that we identify with the most generally. We need a personality. And it's our vehicle to express through in our, physical incarnation. It's called the lower self in the sense, not meaning low like bad, but just a level. I don't know. I think some of you could probably describe that better, but I just want to emphasize it doesn't mean less than. It's a needed aspect, but certainly there are higher vibrations or levels within. And so what becomes so important is when we're talking about the soul, and as a result, how that creates our relationship with the soul and its development increases our ability to experience continuity of consciousness. I'm just going to give you a side note from the numerology perspective. There's an aspect, if one is looking at the chart from a spiritual perspective, there's a vibration in the numerology chart called the soul vibration. Now, some may not be thinking of it as literally, where I do. Some books call it the heart's desire, for instance. And then the personality, which is self-explanatory in numerology, that part of self that is often seen more by others, or how we see ourselves, or how we express the soul through the personality. And I always emphasize that, and this is true for our topic tonight of soul infusion, we want to take the qualities of our soul, that connection with our soul, and over time continue to align with it, or it's called soul infusion, where we bring the soul, more and more of the soul qualities and expression into our personality. So the personality becomes a vehicle for the soul rather than, dominating everything. Or I suppose, obviously we need an ego. We all need an ego, but of course, when we have more soul infusion, we're not going to be operating out of the ego constantly. So that's what I'll say about the numerology, but it's very interesting that way. How does the soul want to express through the personality? Okay, and this is a nice simple diagram that I just love. I think it's very useful, where we see the inverted triangle, the personality level above with the physical body at the lower part of the diagram. And then obviously, like we said before, there are many levels and planes within each of us. However, you see the personality contains the rational mind and the emotional. And then, of course, as we move through higher vibrations, those get more refined. But the vertical line, called the rainbow bridge, is also called the antakarana, and it connects us to our higher levels, our soul, the higher mind, universal love, and on up through the planes to a higher spiritual will and purpose. And so I hope this visual helps see the antakarana in a vertical way and know that it's something we build. We need to build it or construct it. It's not automatically there. At least that's my understanding. It's a communication conduit for the soul to express its wisdom and guidance. And from TheoWiki, the Wikipedia for Theosophy, according to Helena Blavatsky, the antakarana is an aspect or function of the lower mind and retains its original purity, active whenever there is a spiritual aspiration. It's, figuratively speaking, a path or a bridge that acts as a two-way communication. And she emphasized it begins to build when the lower mind aspires to the higher. So, it's nice to know that when we start to have those aspirations, we're getting that rolling. I'd like to hear your comments in the discussion later about our development in past lives and how that relates, but that's, with the Rainbow Bridge. And one more way to describe the Rainbow Bridge is an inner space that separates the consciousness of the personality from the soul and even beyond, and is located on the mental plane. And the reason we need to construct it, or how we can construct it, I should say, are three main ways. One is through heartfelt service, the urge, desire to serve. And I would expect that's a growing awareness of our oneness as well. So the demonstration of soulful love in our outer world, our outer life, creates the threads of inner substance needed to initially bridge the gap lying between the soul and personality. And I remember one of my teachers always said, this is a side note, that service to, let's say, family members, she always said that's not service, it's obligation. But I disagree, depending on the circumstances and the people. I've always felt that, sure, that's there sometimes, more of a have to feeling or I should do it feeling. But honestly, I disagree that service can be to anyone or any, not just, and it counts if it's somebody in the family too. But as you know, greater service to one another, to our communities, to our world, to spirit, to the whole is whatever we're drawn to do is what's important for you and your soul. And then another key to constructing the Antakarana is study and developing the abstract mind. The soul's intuitive impressions can be mentally registered and rightly interpreted. Then communicate. It's a communicative conduit for the soul to express its wisdom and guidance. And then the third and probably most important way to strengthen the rainbow bridge is meditation. And I learned that the filaments of the mental substance are added into this bridge. So every meditation has the potential of adding substance to the Antakarana. And it can be experienced or seen when the meditator is able to create an inner alignment with the soul, or have that sense of alignment with the soul. And then a brief mention on the voice of the silence by with Blavatsky. Actually, it's a Von quote, really, that we become the path. Didn't you say that about the Antakarana? Von, didn't you say the rainbow bridge can represent that we become the path? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Oh, we become the rainbow bridge?
Well, you said, I remember you saying at one point, we become the path, and that could be reflected, created.
Yeah.
So sorry to put you on the spot, but I thought that was important.
Yeah, I can't remember the context of
Yeah.
that.
Well, we were talking about voice of the silence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was important. So, okay, everybody's going to get asked a question in pop quiz. Okay. This is the soul mantra, I am the soul, which perhaps you say it frequently, perhaps it's new to you. It's something that I say several times a week, if not every day. For me, it builds that connection and kind of pulls me out of some of my personality stuff. And I want to mention where in the part where it says, my will is now to lift the lower self into the light divine. That light am I. Therefore, I must ascend to where that lower self awaits my coming. And when I say it, I can feel that. I can feel the part of me that's higher reaching down or descending into the lower self, which is, like I said, a completely necessary part of us, but that it helps it to lift. And I can feel it. And I'm just a big advocate for this mantra for soul alignment and soul infusion as one of the techniques. And then it ends with that which desires to lift and that which cries for lifting are now at one, such is my will. And it's, I think, very powerful. And if we were in a room, we could say it together, but on Zoom, it just doesn't work because of it just doesn't. So here I go again, doing all the talking, but I am the soul, and also love am I. Above all else I am, both will and fixed design. My will is now to lift the lower self into the light divine. That light am I. Therefore, I must descend to where that lower self awaits my coming. That which desires to lift and that which cries for lifting are now at one. Such is my will. And then I could describe a soul alignment technique, but I'm going to check the time. I think I would come back to that, but not at the moment, but maybe something I can come back to later. And so we have looked at death from the perspective of a soul activity, that death is a soul activity. We've looked at some of the levels and constructs of our being. We've looked at, discussed some of the import of where the soul fits into this picture and how important it is in our. Certainly there are other levels. The Buddhic plane above the soul is also something we can tap into. I don't know if you remember that inverted triangle. Jean had a diagram of, the regular triangle and then the inverted triangle. The Buddhic plane is just in the tip of that inverted triangle. And there's other levels of the Buddhic plane, but at least for me, I have not, you can kind of peek up into the Buddhic plane, like reaching up and looking around. But tonight, this is about the soul and developing our continuity of consciousness. And as I move into, I want to shift to a little bit more of the beauty of the soul and the, not just our mechanics we're looking at, which are very important to our studies, but the rose is a symbol for the soul. So now this lovely, beautiful pink rose really demonstrates the spiral shape form within the rose, every rose. And I just love this rose. And I have a personal affinity with roses. I mean, roses, of course, have so many meanings and so many symbols to, but as a symbol for the soul, that really resonates with me. And as the petals of the rose develop, the Fibonacci series can be seen, sometimes called the golden spiral. I think most of you have heard of it in sacred geometry. And I don't know all the measurements offhand of the Fibonacci sequence, but you will see this in nature in many different ways. And we know there are other forms of sacred geometry in nature. But here within the rose, it's prominent. And to me, the center of the rose, as it represents the soul, is like going deep, 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 more and more inward into the soul. And I see a light in it, like a soft, inviting light within the center of the rose when I image within myself. And then as the rose unfolds its petals, it becomes an unfolding expression of the soul. So here you see the Fibonacci spiral or sequence and the overlay of the Fibonacci. And someone who I'm sure could explain all the scientific aspects of this. But this is I just love it so much I can't tell you how it so perfectly fits within the Fibonacci sequence. And do you see the spiral nature of it? But as it gets, I would hope that one of you can talk more about the Fibonacci when we discuss. Okay, hope is called the Susan's rose because I use this rose on my website, and it has been such a thread for me for so many years, the rose, and many different ways, but certainly, and tonight I'm focusing on a symbol of the soul. And the spiral that you see there was drawn by my website designer because she couldn't put the whole overlay on it, but she actually drew it in there. It's not my favorite, but I wanted to emphasize the sacred geometry of it and the spiral. So that's my rose, and that color resonates with me. And the symbolism, well, I look at it as our unfolding spiritual nature and our soul essence. And there's a poem that I came across many years ago that I love so much, and it spoke to me so much about the rose and the symbol for me. I wrote to the author and asked her if I could use it, and she said yes. On my, years ago, on an old website I used to have, which was called Rose Light. So that goes way back, into the early 90s or mid 90s when I had Rose Light. And now, and my wedding ceremonies are willow rose weddings. So you get the idea. On my checkbooks or my checks was the rose embossed on them. You get so many meanings to the rose. And it's the equivalent in the East is the lotus. And I would like to share that poem I just mentioned with you. There it is, Rose of Life. This is the one where I got permission from the poet to use it many years ago. I am unfolding gently beneath your loving touch, becoming. I let wholeness breathe my petals free. Awareness, sweet fragrant spirit touching senses into life. Wisdom, giving beauty back to the universe. Knowing, each petal, sweet miracle of life. Oneness, we are hues of color, yet one in spirit's blossom. Don't you love it? It can speak to us in several levels. It occurred to me during the break that I'd like to share a little story with you, and it has to do with the rose, and it has to do with it having such deep meaning. I think perhaps it was one of the main first symbols that I was given or tuned into in myself, or it meant something for a specific situation. But this is way back in 1991, 92, 90, in that range. I had it's such a painful emotional experience I was going through at the time, and certainly a long-term experience of grief and emotional pain and etc. And it also struck me at deeper levels as well. So with that, I remember one night and was well into this process, but I remember one night I felt like, what if you just don't make it? I mean, it was almost like, and I meant emotionally or, psychologically, what does that look like if you just can't? You just have some kind of break, I guess is the best word at the moment I can think of. And so I asked my higher self, for a symbol. I had read that somewhere. You could ask your high self for an image. That's what it was, an image to help with the situation. So that's what I did. I simply asked my high self for an image to help me with the situation. Perhaps not quite those words, but very similar. And immediately what happened was I had this image of myself it was living color in my mind's eye, but it was living color, and it was me, and it was probably, the chest up. And I don't know if I created the drama, but my hair was in the blowing. And I think I had white on, there was movement like air, and you know, in the gown or whatever I was wearing. But here's the key. And it was beautiful as far as the lighting and everything, just this beautiful glow. And then what happened is there's a single stem, a long stem rose, red rose, that my palms were open. The rose was standing in my palms, just the stem and the beautiful, red rose itself. And I was lifting it up like this, almost like offering that kind of feeling. And I hope you could see how my hands went pretty high. And I looked up, and it's hard to explain, but I know when I knew it changed me. It changed me. It became the healing for that situation over time. It became, I'm not going to, talk about, maybe it was a symbol for my soul. Maybe it was, any number of things. But I cannot tell you how much that meant to me and what it did for my healing and peace and comfort, I would say, from spirit. And then even with all that, the next day I thought, maybe I imagined a lot of that, right? Well, then I got my validation when I was driving to work, and I came to a four-way stop, and there was a man and woman, young couple, about to cross in front of my car across the street. And would you believe that the woman was carrying a single red rose? And it wasn't Valentine's Day. How, those kinds of experiences. And it was winter. I forgot to say it was winter, and it wasn't wrapped in plastic or anything. And so she and this guy walk across with this single red rose. If I needed any validation for that experience, that was it. So I wanted to share that with you, as how powerful that image became for me in many other ways too. But I would love in our discussion to talk about symbols of the soul, and perhaps there are some symbols that you're familiar with in your own life, or even tonight some imagery comes into you that symbolizes a message from your soul, anything in that realm. So thanks for letting me share that, and I hope you enjoyed it. So take a breath, and I want to shift for a minute to conscious dying. Earlier today, Hope and I were talking about conscious dying, and we have spent a fair amount of time on continuity of consciousness, as well as how tools to develop that and learning more about the soul's role, etc., and the connection with our soul. So on the subject of conscious dying, I think a lot of us have different expectations of what that might mean, or definitions of what that might mean. And so let me offer you something Hope and I talked about just today. And I want you to know that Hope is actually the one who downloaded this. And she's well versed in the topic. So this is coming from Hope. But it's just, you can close your eyes if you want, or otherwise just take a breath and listen to these words. Conscious dying is the ability to close your eyes in death, knowing you are taking your last breath, accepting fully that you are leaving this body behind, as if removing an old robe and opening your spiritual eyes outside of your body, being fully aware of your surroundings and your non-physical body and how it works. Then, from there, being able to choose to move through the planes of light where it is you want to go. The next phase of that experience is to reconnect and remember all of who you are with an expansion of consciousness. And sometime, that's the conclusion of that part, but then sometime later, Hope emailed me. I'm changing my view here so I can get the rest of it. So I hope that what I just read is helpful to you. It certainly, I thought, was a beautiful way to describe it. And just the fact that you're able to close your eyes in death knowing you're taking your last breath, that's that really struck me.
Susan, I found the email and I'll read it, and then I can edit in a slide later. So my sense is that in order to establish continuity of consciousness life to life, the first requirement is to attain at least one instance of a conscious death. It's that first step out of the body while knowing with no fear that we will be meeting love and seeing light, remembering that there is no separation. That is what creates the ability to then move into the next life and the next, remembering more and more of previous between lives and our so-called past, future lives that are just part of the continuum of that one life, that is the I am presence of who we really are.
And thank you for all that hope. So I think I'd like to share with you one of the techniques for soul alignment. If that would be something you're interested in. It doesn't take long, I don't think I'm going to take you through it like in meditation, but I'll describe it for you. Okay? So after you do a little bit of grounding techniques, whatever you like to do, you would imagine your soul star, which is about 6, 8, 10 inches above your head. And you can imagine it as a ball of light or a big star. You know, it's a point literally called the soul star that is a conduit for the soul. And what you do is take a stream of light from that soul star and bring it down through your chakras, your upper chakras, the crown, through the third eye, that stream continuing to the throat chakra and the heart chakra. And then you want to loop it, continue that stream of light, looping it from the heart back up through the throat center and the third eye and the crown, so that stream of light from the soul star is continuous, in that, what I just described. And then, if you wish, you can imagine that the light of the soul is flowing over you, in you, through those upper centers. I picture it just filling the upper centers with soul light. And I personally just say my physical heart is bathed in soul light and soul love. And you can send it to some other areas. I'm just giving you, some variations. But that first part I mentioned is the main thing. And then as you filled the upper chakras, the upper centers of your levels, then sometimes I check to see if there's anywhere more soul light is needed. I might just image that or become aware of something in myself that needs more. And then from that point, I say, I am aligned and in a state of knowingness. I am aligned and in a state of knowingness. And then I say the soul mantra, which we had up on the screen earlier. I am the soul, and also love am I, etc. And that's my way of doing my technique frequently. And so I offered to you as something that's, I think, important. There are other ways to do soul alignment, but that would be, making sure the light of the soul is flowing in through the chakras or the centers. I'm just closing my eyes to think if there's a part. I am aligned in a state of knowingness. Yeah, that was it. So it's time to conclude this talk and presentation. And I'd like to just emphasize that, every one of us is destined to bring light into the world. And ultimately, it's the divine love and divine wisdom and divine light that flows through us and out into the world, into whatever ways that we manifest our own soul's purpose in the world. And certainly, whatever practices you have and all the things we've talked about tonight and over these study group nights, to incorporate into what feels right for you, because whatever feels right to you, to continue to connect and strengthen the relationship with the soul. And just last night, a friend and I were talking about one thing that manifests in our, when you bring it down to everyday life, one thing that manifests with that soul connection is over time, we become more and more inner directed. And we take our direction inwardly, less and less from the outer. We may get information from the outer, get people's opinions from the outer. But I think the more and more soul connection we develop, the more it becomes almost imperative that our inner direction is where we should. I remember a few years ago kind of having that struggle with what not what I should do, but, looking at different aspects of something or whatever, but also having a sense within. And a person said to me, you can't, I'm paraphrasing, you can't do it that way. You take your direction is, well, you are inwardly directed. In other words, not just a saying, but just that there was, that'd be important that I recognize that. And it was, does this make sense as I talk? I know it's hard on mute, but I think that is really, and one way that we experience continued deepening connection with our soul, more and more inwardly directed. And sometimes that does not make sense to those in our lives around us. That's when it can become real interesting, but very important to realize it. Anyway, so as you creatively express your love and soul wisdom into your to support the betterment of humanity. The soul is to be a beacon of light in a darkened world, or a soul-infused person, somebody who's on a spiritual path in whatever tradition or way that is. But whatever inner light that shines within you has a purpose, has a sense, a service it would like. I'm talking about soul purpose now, sorry. There is purpose for each of us in our soul level. And those of us who consider ourselves light workers or new group of world servers or disciples, or there are different names, for the same thing, that this is the time to really, in these times, to really try to tap into that and follow that inner guidance, which I'm not saying it as, I know the group listening knows this. However, I just want to emphasize how important it is to really bring that soul light forward and bring it out into the world in whatever ways you're called. So let's go to that last slide, Hope. This is this web of life is, I think, sums it all up for us in terms of our oneness of spirit that unites us all. From each moment we draw life. From each living being we draw love. From the earth and the sun we draw nourishment. From each we receive, and to each we joyfully give. For the web that connects each to us weaves its tapestry throughout our being, uniting us with all. Separateness is an illusion. And for me, I think, it's lifetime work, and beyond to really move into oneness, but certainly progress is made as we progress spiritually. So thank you so much. Blessings to all of you, and I look forward to some discussion.
Thank you, Susan. That was great.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Oh, it's so good to hear your voices. It's really hard talking to yourself.
Being in a vacuum.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I know that you know this, but I was hoping that these words would just, give us that, every so often we need inspiration. Pardon? Oh, I thought.
Well, I really liked your charts. I remember them from Jean's talk as well, and she shows the subtle bodies, and she differentiates between the intuitive level and the Buddhic level, and I think that's really, really spot on, because I hear so many people describing the Buddhic level as an intuitional level, and I think that. Moreover, I mean, I don't know if it's heavily pertinent to your talk, but in a way I feel it is, because I think when you go, the intuitional level is something that is kind of part of us, is like our causal body. It is maybe one of the higher aspects of our lower self, but in terms of our higher self, the parts of us that will be ongoing. I think it starts with the Buddhic body, and the Buddhic body is after all the awakening of one's self-realization, and then beyond self-realization, then we see universal realization, and then of course the divine self, the divine level. So I think in terms of like conscious dying and the continuity of consciousness, I mean, at least to me, it seems important that we grow beyond where everyone in the whole world seems to be right now as good old New Agers. We're like in the sense of awareness, we're at body awareness. It's like whatever that is. We're watching our breath. And we're how would I say, we're becoming self-realized and self-aware, but beyond that, where we're going in terms of our consciousness becoming one with universal consciousness is becoming one with universal consciousness, and that is decidedly above self-realization. And I see so many people thinking if they become self-aware in this life, self-aware that they've reached enlightenment. And I'm sorry, I don't think that's quite it. I can feel my hand and see my breath on a cold winter's day, but I don't think that really is who I am, because I think when our light separates, I think that we're in search of the divine light. And vertically aligning in that way, we're going to realize that we are, after all, not only in search of the light, we're we are the light.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm.
Starlight. Is it, I've heard or read that the masters of wisdom reside on the Buddhic plane. Is that anything you've heard?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard that. Heard that. Yeah.
Um, and then, another thing for a different topic, but that would fit into all this too, is to talk about the solar angel, which is really
Yeah.
not for tonight, but, I would love to bring
Yeah.
that into some of this too. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
The other thing I noticed about your charts, and I can't quite describe what they were, but the three triangles,
mhm.
life, and what was the other one? It's like soul. Okay, so
Personality.
the personality. I noticed that everyone had a point of light in itself as a triangle, and that is that is so esoteric. That the triangle forms the one that we are in fact a trinity ourselves. So, but that at every point, I could see the influence of the seven rays of light. I could see will, I
Mm.
could see love, I could see
Oh.
wisdom, and I'm thinking, whoa, did this chart come from Alice Bailey?
Probably.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
A light though,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
charts are limited of triangle.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's great to see the light coming through all of
Coming through all of them, right? The light shines through all of them. It descends and then it rises above,
them.
ascends.
Could it also be William? Could it be filtered through William too? Could it have been his?
William.
William
No.
Meter.
Oh yes, yes.
No.
Good.
Oh, it's Alice Bailey, but William Meter's,
Well, it's kind of beyond meterism, I think.
I think it was.
No, but he filters
I think
William.
it was.
William,
Does he?
yeah, William.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
William distills down Alice Bailey.
He distills, yeah.
Yeah, he does.
Okay.
Kind
Oh,
of
we can
clears
say
it.
it.
He
Yeah.
simplifies all of those words.
So it's
Written.
daily in the sense of, but
Yeah.
I think he put that into a form or a diagram.
I think on the diagram there in the corner, there was a little thing where it was from and what page it was from. And it looked like an
Okay.
Alice Bailey title that I probably have read.
It feels very Bailey, and I think
Yeah.
I've seen it somewhere. And of course,
Yeah.
she wrote so much directly or tangentially about the seven rays of
Mhm.
light, and I think that as primordial driving forces of all creation,
Mm-hmm.
and so I got to think that the diagram came from her.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I have a folder with several things in it. So that's, I was grabbing things and then I'm sure that was a meter handout.
Okay.
at that point. But Bailey, yeah.
Yeah.
It also reminded me a little bit of the Kabbalistic tree of life.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, everything so much of what we study overlaps. There are in imagery, perhaps,
Right.
it's like, well, here's the seven rays and they connect to this and this connects to that and that chart in a way. Because I was looking at that, trying to figure out what, how that would fit into the chart, and it's not perfectly in the chart, but it's very similar. And there we have
What is
This was at the office.
yes.
You remember that?
Oh, I wish.
Oh yeah. The Oregon tree-
Three-dimensional tree of life.
Yeah.
That's really awesome.
Wow.
Can you send that to me? That's Erica
Yeah, I
speaking.
will.
Thank you.
I will. Right after we're done. Yeah.
Vaughn, when you mentioned the self-realization and all that
Yeah.
people sometimes think that's the.
That's it. Yeah.
Mm,
Sometimes I used to say, because and I know, we explore things on the path in the beginning, lots of exploration, trying things out, right? I get it, but I used to, it's kind of snarky of me, but I used to think, I meditate, therefore I am. Or no, I sat on the mountain and meditated at sunrise, therefore I am, and it's just, I have reached, I knew people who had that
Experience.
take on it. And that I
Oh,
know
yeah.
that's a little more simplified than what you're talking about, Vaughn,
Yeah.
but there's a point when, and I know,
Well-
the more I know I don't know. And the more I progress, the more I realize how, so I'm not saying, but it's just that if we have some level of connect with our other levels.
Oh, yeah. But the ascetic life becomes very, very alluring to a lot of people, and it takes you a long, long ways.
Yeah.
And there you are. You're sitting on top of the mountain. You're no longer part of life.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
heard something very special lately, and it is when we pray, we're talking to God. But when we're meditating, God is talking to us.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well said.
Listening.
Yeah.
Ciela, it's nice to see you. I haven't seen you for years in person.
Your background, Ciela, is just so beautiful. I mean, you look like this living portrait. It's just beautiful. Well, of course, you are the living portrait, but with that background and the golden glow, it's lovely.
You're glowing. Yes.
Yes.
Well, it hides my wrinkles.
Oh, maybe that's why I like the overlay of the rose. I said the softness of the glow, it's like, but
It's taken 3 sessions to get there. But when you're ready, I do want to make a small comment on your Fibonacci spirals.
oh,
Please
great.
do, yes, yes.
So I've studied for quantum mechanics for years,
Mm.
and I've spent a lot of time applying quantum mechanics to business and how to make business successful. But one of the things I use is the model of quantum mechanics and identifying organizations that you can see the quantum fractal in the organization, and you can review, compare organizations based on those fractals. Well, the other thing that's important is that that's true with every living thing. When you look at a maple tree, the leaves are fractal. When you look at a birch tree, it's a different fractal.
Mhm.
And it is my experience, having lived and remembering many lives, that each individual is a fractal. And we carry that fractal as a mark of our spirit from life to life to life. And yes, the Fibonacci spiral is one fractal, and it relates to the rose. But you, Susan, have a fractal that you carry from life to life to life. Vaughn, you carry a fractal that's unique to you, and you carry it from life to life to life. And I only mention that because I have very clear memories of 16 lives in the last 1,000 years, and to the point of detail where I can say, that's the name, that's where they live, this is the name of me in that life, and the name of my children. And so
Wow.
I can verify that from personal experience. Of course, that is very subjective, but I wanted to bring that up as my personal view and see what you thought about it.
I love that. So to tune into our fractal, is it something, can you describe more about the fractal? Like each of us carrying a certain fractal or different one.
Yes, and we carry it from life to life to life.
Right.
And it's
More
kind of like
examples
a
of it?
thumbprint or fingerprint that we have, only it's on our spirit. And it is the you used the word, now I can't recall what it is, but it that you use, but it is really the impression of our higher self that we carry from life to life, and it's unique. It's as unique and as formulated as a mathematical fractal in defining a worm or defining a tree or defining a palm tree.
Wow.
Each of those have a uniqueness about them, that allows us to identify it.
I'm
And so
curious. I'm curious.
when you meet a person from a previous life, in this life, you identify them not by how they look, but by that fractal signature that they carry with them into this life. So
And
again,
on
that's just
on that very point, when we would meet, say, someone of our soul group or someone of our, let's say, a twin flame, someone to whom we have been identified throughout time, then we would identify them. But I'm wondering how we would connect in terms of a patterning as fractals.
Well, it's more, I think, more of a recognition. Sometimes you don't connect at all. Sometimes you look at that person and say, I know something about you, and I don't want to get any closer to you, because you recognize that fractal pattern as being something that doesn't connect with you. But that selfness that you really are, that deep personal self, is a construct that you carry from life to life, and it has all of the characteristics of a mathematical fractal.
So when you speak about fractals, in my mind, I imagine fractal art that has that repeated pattern. And the way you're describing it, what I see is like there is that, I guess, the first fractal that branches to the next and the next and the next. Is that what you're saying? It's like we have that one starting one, and then we move into a branch that's the repeating, and it's that same pattern that has this infinite repetition.
A snowflake, like a
Yeah.
snowflake. Exactly.
Oh,
like
that so it's kind of like a energetic fingerprint.
Yep.
Okay.
I think so.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to frame it in my brain to get past that image of art, which is beautiful, but it's like that makes sense as is
yeah.
like a fingerprint of our spirit that is the same from life to life to life. But then each is separate that we get to have separate experiences, of course, in each lifetime.
That is just, I love that.
And it's mathematical. And
And it's-
Cieladora is a mathematician and a genius, and applying it to organizational development as her career. Okay, so I told Susan that I wanted to tell a story, which is that I wouldn't be here without Cieladora. I wouldn't be in Theosophical. I wouldn't be a soul awakened without her, because I had spontaneous past life awakenings and lucid dreams that scared the living daylights out of me, because when she met me, I was the very buttoned up conservative. I wasn't exactly Baptist, but I was real adjacent to that. You guys know this, who know me. I've talked about it. And she kind of patiently waited, because she knew me from our past lives together. We could do a whole program just talking about that, I think. But that would be very, very interesting. But anyway, so she was waiting for me to remember who I was, because she remembered who I was. And she kind of helped me over years get comfortable with who I am. And so thank you for that. And I just wanted to say thank you for the path that I'm on now, because I wouldn't be here without you. So thank you.
Hope you're too kind, and you're making me a little embarrassed, as you
I know, but it's true. I just, these are my dear soul friends, and I want them to know how important you are to me. And thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for saying
Yeah.
that. You were very important to me too, because you brought me into this life. Between lives, Hope told me that I should come here. We were in Bardo, and Hope said, you're needed here, and I'll meet you. And if it hadn't been for Hope, I wouldn't have come into this life.
Wow. That's
So no pressure.
What?
So no pressure on me.
No, no pressure. No.
No pressure.
That's wonderful, the depth of that connection and that you're aware of it. And then you think about all of us who have such stories to tell about how we came to this or that. And sometimes I step back and think, if I don't feel the guidance I'd like to feel at any given time, all I have to do is remember how the path is just, connected me with people who would be spiritual family. And you know what I'm saying. So on the subject, just another question on the fractal. So let's say that energetic imprint. Would that be something from our monadic level then that carries through? What do you think? Like our signature of our divine
I see it as a signature. As I look at the lives I remember and the people I remember in those lives, we mature. We become more complex. That signature becomes more complex. In the same way a painting becomes more complex in the hands of a great artist. When you go using your rose analogy, a child can paint a rose and it's recognizable. And then you get a college kid who paints a rose and it's recognizable, but put in the hands of a master and it's extremely beautiful. It has matured. It's still a rose. Just like as we move from life to life, we become increasingly more mature. And I'm going to say something that's out of the blue here that I probably have no right to say. But looking at all of you, there was one person in this group that I've known in a previous life other than Hope, and that's Vaughn.
Ah,
Hi.
Thank you. I can believe that. I don't remember 16 lies, but I do remember 4. And I have dim memories of others. So you're probably one of my teachers from a previous life.
Or maybe a peer.
Yeah. So I know I have very close relationships with someone who I have known in many previous lives. And I would say that we are twin flames. And she describes me as her teacher, and I describe her as her teacher. And I think that's how we go through life, with the help of others.
You were in the same monastery as I was.
Ah, was it in South America?
It was a monastery in what is now Pakistan, on the border between
Okay.
India and Pakistan. And
I
you
do.
were one of my peers.
I have great memories of that. Yeah, yeah.
And I was male. I was a boy then.
Oh,
And you were my senior.
oh.
But I remember you from that life.
Well, then you watched me die.
No,
How charming.
I don't think I watched you die, but I was there in the monastery when you departed.
You know, I can look today in museums at artifacts from that time and place, and it just through the roof memories and thoughts, and it's just incredible. But I think when you meet someone that you've known in previous lives, I think I'm always filled with this kind of like time check. It's like, in terms of like life purpose, where are we now? I always feel like it's clicking. It's like, I know time is eternal and it goes on and on with infinitely, but it's like, where are we now? Because we're obviously trying to advance, all of us, and that's the beauty, and it's taken me, I think, this lifetime to stand back and say, oh wow, they're just advancing, But But thank you for
Some are
remembering.
regressing, right? No, I'm kidding. Yeah. I remember it
Anyway,
being-
thank you for allowing me to participate.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, God, we're so
Thank
glad
you.
you're here. Yeah, thank you, Ciela. That was, yes. Just hit me. I just want to clarify something I said earlier about when I talked about numerology and the part of the chart that's the soul and the personality. I just want to clarify that the soul vibration in numerology isn't about our whole soul. It's defining a piece of the pie when we use numbers to describe 1 through 9. It's saying it's not what does the soul purpose want to express. We couldn't identify all that through that, but it's whatever number, whatever qualities of that energy are prominent in that place in the chart gives you a clue as to an area that the soul is important for its expression in the physical. I just want to clarify that because I wasn't talking about the whole soul coming through.
And it's not like, I mean, it's an evolving process. I mean, we are works in progress,
Yeah.
literally.
Mhm.
So when you say your life's purpose, your soul's mission,
Right.
you get a. It's like baseball. You're going to get a shot at bat every inning.
Yeah.
And
Thank
I like
goodness.
that. Yeah. Is there anybody have a burning thought or question or anything as we
Susan, I just wanted to, when you talked about soul alignment, and that's something when you bring it down through here, when I started healing, when I started doing Reiki, on a client or whatever, I'm a massage therapist. And it's like that centering, but it's that, and I could feel that with you when you brought that in. But sometimes, and then bringing it to the heart, but sometimes we have to take it all the way down to the earth and bring it up too. It depends on
that's another
where you're at and where, there's several ways to
You're
do
right.
it. But
And
I
that's-
felt that when you were doing that, it was just like,
Yeah.
oh, that feels so good right there, right in there.
I bring the earth energy up through my feet and up to the lower chakras for grounding, but I know there's also part of that technique was taught too that to include the solar plexus in that loop,
Mhm.
depending on where a person's at, but I didn't include that in this one. But I hear what you're saying that there's
Right.
is there an exercise in Reiki where you'll have somebody at the feet and somebody at the head and someone at the shoulders, and you're running the energy through the body in a loop, head to feet. Because I mean, we do that in therapeutic touch, and it's like really wild.
I think what happens, and I don't know if it's actually taught that way, but when I did my Reiki group and I'd have 4 people in one table,
Yeah.
we'd each take turns on the table, and one would be at the head, one would be at the feet, and then
Yeah.
people on either
Two at the
side.
sides. Yeah. Same.
And I think with Reiki, it depends on what the purpose is. I have a tendency not to really direct energy specifically unless it is like a specific thing. I try to allow it to go where it needs to be. So sometimes you'll feel that circulating, and then and sometimes you'll see colors. I mean, there's a lot of different ways it.
Yeah. Well, I've done that with the group, I guess, without necessarily any particular point to directing the energy, except that to get the energy flowing through the body and really get it flowing. And the interesting group dynamic seems to be that not only is the person who's the recipient of all these healing hands feeling the energy rushing head to toe, and you can actually feel the clockwise pattern to it, is that the different people would have the sensation of the energy also going through them, but not like head to toe, but like, I don't know, kind of a loopy sort of thing.
I'm not a Reiki master, but I have, or at least not in this life, I'm not a Reiki master. But I had an experience 2 years ago at the deathbed of a friend, and I was called in by that family, and I was prompted by them to do Reiki on this man who is all connected to machines. And while I was doing Reiki with him, his blood pressure dropped, his heartbeat stabilized, and the nurse came in and said, "What are you doing to this man? You are making his vital signs within normal." And he was dying, and they were watching him fade away, and his blood pressure was falling, and his heartbeat was erratic, and his everything was just deteriorating. And when I was actually in the process of doing Reiki with him, and remember, I'm not good. I was just incidentally there. I was able to see exactly the effect on his body from the exchange of energy in the Reiki process. I would never have believed it, but it was so tangible and it was so real that the nurses in the nurses station came in to comment.
That's amazing. That's really cool. Yeah.
It is. It shows what can be done and what does happen. When
And
you
then
do
those
it.
nurses, the nurses had witnessing that, then that changed their, you know.
Well, I think they wanted to kick me out, but you know,
Stop messing with
We had
the
a magic
process.
potion.
yeah, basically,
Yeah.
stop messing with our machines, basically. But,
Yeah.
But all of you who do Reiki, I want you to consider how potent and powerful it is to the point that it can be measured on machines in a hospital bed.
Yeah.
Well, and there are nurses who do that. I mean, they are trained and come into, here they're pretty progressive and they'll allow a nurse to be in an operating room to run energy during the operation if someone requests it. They just require that they scrub in, so it has to be a nurse, but they'll allow it. So.
I didn't know that they would allow that.
Well, I know that my friend who had a mastectomy, they had someone in the room. In the operating room.
Yeah.
Energy for her. I'm gonna stop recording it now because my file is gonna get really big.
Okay. We got to